everybody, welcome tonight. Thanks for coming out to the webinar tonight, how financial aid and scholarships work, right? So I'll introduce myself in a second, but, when it comes to college financial aid, I've been doing this a long time. Many families, struggle during this process, right? And it makes sense. The stress levels are high, the anxiety levels are high. Why we're talking about your kids, right? And your money, right? Two of the most, important, sensitive topics that there are. So those stress levels, those anxiety levels are naturally heightened, right? Same is true for pretty much every family. Compounded with that, right? Compounded with that is when it comes to college financial aid and scholarships, the college process in general, there's just a lack of information about how the process works, right? What money's available, what's aid available, how do schools calculate aid, right? I spoke to a mom today, and a lot of families I feel like are in a similar position to this. I'm going to apply to schools. I hope I get something, right? Well, as they say, the old cliche, right? Hope is not a strategy, So tonight, our goal here tonight is really kind of threefold, or we're going to kind of go in three different sections, with the goal being, by the time you leave here tonight, you have a much better understanding of how the process works and how to successfully navigate it for yourself, your family, your child. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how colleges actually award money, what money's available, and how colleges actually award money, right? The second piece is I'm going to give you some tips, some tricks, some strategies that you want to be aware of and can implement when you actually sit down to fill out the financial aid applications in the upcoming weeks and months. And then the last piece is what I call kind of the nuts and bolts component of the program. Basically, I'm going to kind of give you the logistics of how to actually go about completing these financial aid applications. So that's what we're going to tackle here tonight. So hopefully, we got 3 hours, right? This Zoom is good for 3 hours. So we'll, have to cover a lot of information. Just kidding, right, guys? Just kidding. I'm going to tell you it's going to be an hour. Probably going to be an hour 15, honestly, but time flies when you're having fun. So, this is obviously a very serious, important topic, but this is a very relaxed, kind of laid back webinar tonight. Make this as interactive as you want. I'm open for questions. Feel free. If you do want to ask questions, don't use the chat. Use the Q&A. Use your name. Be anonymous. Whatever you want to do. Kind of logistically, this webinar is being recorded. Right. It's one of the beauties of Zoom. We can watch this recording over and over and over again. And who can't get enough college financial aid, right? But yeah, it is being recorded, so you can watch it. You get an email tomorrow as long as you're registered. And make this as interactive as possible. A couple things with the questions. I cannot answer any specific family questions. My family has this situation. We can't do that on the webinar, right? I'll give you some resources at the end if you have, to address some of those specifics. We just really kind of have to talk high level. Also, too, I'm by myself tonight, which is fine, but try to stick to the slide that we're on as far as the questions are concerned. Just keeps the flow of the presentation going a lot better. Guys, I will cover the FAFSA changes, right? I will cover that. I will cover divorce separated situations. I will cover 529s. Those are some of the key ones that I get questions on all the time. So I ask that you sit tight on those questions until I do cover them. Anything else, feel free, fair game. All right. And you can see here, right? So, like, again, I work with a company called College Aid Pro. Our mission to end the student loan crisis. How do you do that? Empowering families to shop smarter for college. Look, most families don't shop for college, right? They just pick schools. Those are different. So what we want to help families do, again, kind of one by one, is understand the process as you go into it. And, look, there's a lot of strategy around this process. There's a lot of nuance. This process is not easy and it is not straightforward, right? I'm not going to tell you it is. But, if you have a basic understanding, you're going to be able to navigate it a lot more successfully, right? So that's really the goal here tonight. All right, so that's me, Matt Mulhern. I live in Jersey City, New Jersey. I know we have some Jersey folks and New York folks. I'm kind of right in the middle here, right in Jersey City, born and raised, went to St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City. I've been doing this for over 12. Well, this is my 12th financial aid season, right? As we call it, kind of October 1st kicks off the start of a new financial aid season. So this is the 12th year I've been kind of involved in this field. So I have a really good feel. I've seen a lot of different scenarios, with families, different dynamics, and then the different schools that most of you are going to be interested in looking at. I've dealt with them a ton, and very familiar with how they all work and how they do business. And really haven't done this for as many years I have become very passionate about kind of spreading the gospel of how does this thing work, right? Most people don't know. Most people just don't understand, know how it works. So just trying to get out there and preach the good word of college financial aid. Just helping families understand how it works, right? And better position themselves. You're talking about a lot of money, right? You're talking about your kid's future. Like I said at the outset, obviously two very important topics. So how do you do it? It all starts by understanding how it works, right? Okay, so let's dive in here. What is financial aid? Right? What is financial aid? And do me a favor, any preconceived notions that you have, I'm not going to get anything. A lot of times you're wrong. Maybe you're right, but most times you're wrong. So, what is financial aid? Right? Financial aid is simply a discount on the sticker price, right? A discount on the sticker price. And there's actually three different types of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid, there's merit-based financial aid, and then there's self-help aid, right? Self-help aid, we're going to talk about the least tonight. Why? Because self-help aid is, as I like to say, the least helpful, right? Self-help aid are primarily loans, work study. Obviously, loans you have to pay back, work study you got to work for. There is certainly a time and a place for loans. It is certainly a very important topic. In my expert opinion, now is not the time to be focused on that, right? In terms of loans, trust me when I tell you there's $1 trillion in student loans in this country. You'll be able to get a loan. Obviously, pros and cons to all of these. You'll be able to get a loan though, right? That should not be your focus right now, quite honestly. What your focus should be, right? The easiest way to pay for something, get the cost down as much as you can. Same thing for college. You want to shrink your cost. You want to reduce your costs as low as possible, right? You do that through the other two pools of money that are available, need-based aid and or merit-based aid, right? Merit-based aid is kind of intuitive. We all kind of get, we all kind of understand. Merit-based aid is a scholarship, right? We all kind of obviously heard that word before. Merit-based aid is a scholarship. Merit-based aid is all about the student, right? Merit is all about the student. The students, SAT, GPA, academics, an athlete, an artist, a musician, right? All about the student. So, essentially, a kid applies to a school. The school says, we like this kid. We're going to offer them a financial incentive to come to our school, right? A merit-based scholarship. Kind of intuitive. Everyone kind of gets that. Everyone kind of understands that. A little nuance or a little caveat when it comes to merit, though, is, and a lot of folks don't realize this, not every school in the country gives merit scholarships, right? There are quite a few of them that merit awards do not exist, right? The Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, the NESCAC schools, Amherst, Bates, Middlebury, Bowdoin. You cannot get a merit scholarship at those schools. They don't exist, right? So every school, and kind of getting off track here, but worthwhile, and I'm going to repeat this a lot. Every school is their own business. They all do business differently. They all award money differently, right? So that's merit-based aid, right? All about the student, their academics, their SATs, their GPA, their profile. Merit-based scholarship, that's the first pool of free money that's available. The other pool of free money that's available is what we call need-based financial aid, right? And these two are opposites, right? So merit's all about the student. Need-based financial aid is all about the family. And while we have a pretty good feel for merit-based aid conceptually, how it works, understand it, very, very few people understand how need-based financial aid actually works, right? Not going to be you after we're done tonight, though, right? So need-based financial aid is all about the family. It's based on your income, your assets, number of people in the household, right? It's why you fill out the financial aid applications. It's to qualify for or see if you qualify for need-based financial aid. So we say, okay, all right, first slide here, self-help, I get loans. That's down the road. We'll tackle that later. Merit-based scholarships, I understand. My kid applies to a school, they like them. The school may not have merit-based aid, but if they do, they like my kid, they're going to offer, my kid a merit-based scholarship to attend their school. Well, how about need-based financial aid? How do I know, right? How do I know, one, if my family is going to qualify for need-based financial aid? And then two, if I am going to qualify for need-based financial aid, how much am I going to get, right? Kind of usual questions we hear here or there. So this is the need-based financial aid equation that every single school in the country uses, right? They all use the same need-based financial aid equation. COA minus SAI equals need. Before we break that down, let me start here. Need-based financial aid is not binary, right? Need-based financial aid is not binary. What does that mean? It means that it's possible, if not likely, for most families that you will receive tens of thousands of dollars in need-based financial aid at one college and $0 in need-based financial aid at another, right? It's likely for most of you guys. Why is that? Because this process is one, a very family specific process, right? What's the kid's academics? What are the family's finances? But what a lot of families don't understand, it's also a very college specific process. Again, every college does business differently. They all award money differently, right? All right, so let's start there. Or let's understand that first. Again, that's a very important concept to understand that every college is a different business. So let's break down this equation together. COA minus SAI equals need. So the COA is that big scary sticker price, room, board, tuition, fees, your all-in cost, 50, 60, 70, 80. Some schools now upwards of $90,000 sticker price, right? So they take their cost of attendance, they subtract your family's SAI. The SAI is an actual dollar amount assigned to your family, and it's basically the minimum amount that a school thinks your family is able to pay per year at their school, right? If you ever filled out a FAFSA before, the FAFSA has one purpose. All the FAFSA does is assign your family an SAI. That's all it does, right? You fill in your income, your assets, you click submit. It says, congratulations, your FAFSA submitted. Below it says, it used to be called an EFC. That's one of the FAFSA changes. EFC, they now change the term to SAI. Say, congratulations, your SAI is. This number, for better or worse, is super important, right? So, if you got to duck out of here or, you get bored of me, which obviously that's not going to happen. But if you understand to take away only one thing tonight, understand the SAI. It's that important, right? If you walk away with only one piece of information, have it be, let me figure out what my SAI is. Why? Because that SAI is going to really dictate your best strategy for finding value in this process, right? So finishing the equation, they take the cost of it, and I'm going to illustrate this out in detail here. They take the cost of attendance, they subtract your family's SAI, right? An actual dollar amount assigned to your family. That equals your eligibility for need-based financial aid at a particular school. Now, again, just because you're eligible for need-based financial aid does not mean that you will get that. Why? Once again, because every college is a different business, right? Okay, so let me give you some real world examples here. I'm going to give you two schools kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's start with Columbia, right? We'll use Columbia, obviously elite New York City private school. Cost of attendance $90,000, right? That's the COA, $90,000 all in. So now we'll say this hypothetical family, they have a $40,000 SAI, right? So the Mulhern family, kid gets into Columbia. Now your file's in the financial aid office. Financial aid says we cost $90,000. The Mulhern family's SAI is $40,000. 90 minus 40. You're eligible for $50,000 in need-based financial aid at Columbia. How much is Columbia going to give you? They're going to give you, drum roll, take a guess in your head, $50,000, right? They are going to give you all $50,000. Why? Because they meet 100% of need-based financial aid, right? So every dollar that you're eligible for in need-based aid at Columbia, they are going to give you, right? So you got to pay the 40,000 for your SAI, but they'll pick up the difference because they meet 100% of need-based financial aid. That's Columbia. 100% true. That's how it works. However, right? Big however, not every school does business that way. In fact, most don't. I'm going to give you a school on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? And not to vilify them at all, but Penn State, right? Penn State, obviously popular out-of-state school with a lot of tri-state area kids. Penn State does business completely differently, right? So out-of-state sticker price, Penn State, 60 grand, right? You then subtract the family's SAI, again, 40,000. They go 60 minus 40. At Penn State, you're eligible for $20,000 in need-based aid. How much is Penn State going to give you, right? Think about it in your head, drum roll. Zero. If you get zero, you are correct. Penn State will not give you a dime. They will not give you a dime, guaranteed, right? That's how they do business. So even though you're eligible for 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in grant money at Penn State, you're not getting anything, right? You're going to pay $60,000 a year. Why? That's how they do business, right? That's how it works. So again, if you start to understand this need-based financial aid equation, right, you start to understand that, the important factors here, or where you want to go tonight, what you want to help yourself figure out, your SAI, how colleges do business, right? Now, like I said, I've been doing this for 10, 12 years now, doing presentations. Honestly, pretty much the same exact slide. Now it's called SAI instead of EFC, but pretty much the same. So when I first started doing this, after I would do the slide, people, a lot of times, I get the two most common questions I would get. One, Matt, how do I figure out my SAI? Great question. Two, how am I, as a parent, a mom, a dad? I work all day. I got two other kids. I'm busy. How am I supposed to know how these schools do business? Right? How? All right, Matt, that's what you do. You know what the schools do. How am I supposed to know as the parent? Quite frankly, you're not, right? You're not. As evidenced by the $1 trillion in student loans that exist in this country. So it's not set up for you to know. I'm telling you, this process is not easy and not straightforward. Those two questions, though, are the reason why we created this MyCap software, right? Use it, don't. Create an account, don't. Completely up to you. But for my money, it's the best software of its kind. It's basically a net price calculator on steroids. And I'm going to show it to you in a second. If you register tonight, you should have got an email. Create a free account. You all can go there. If you have a MyCap, if you started putting information in, I would pull it up because I'm going to walk through a MyCap hypothetical in a minute. And what this is going to show you is, one, what your SAI is. Two, how do these different schools do business, right? So here we go. Let's take a look. So this is a family here. Again, no, we're going to come back to this one. Wrong one. So this is a family that wouldn't get any need-based financial aid, but that's not yet. Okay, so this is a need-based family potentially, right? And guys, I had the question the other day, which is a good one. This is legit into the mid-six-figure salary, right? Not mid-six-figure, into it's like $170,000 salary that we're looking at right here, right? So it's not like it's not 40, 50,000 bucks that we're looking at, right? Because I can't tell you the number of times where people start the conversation saying, "I'm not going to get any aid." All right, well, yes, you are if you want to, or if you know how to, what schools to apply to. All right, so what do we want to look at? Oh, we got to laugh. All right, very good. What do we want to look at? Let's start up here, top line, right? So this right now, tonight, you can figure out your SAI, right? You can figure out what your SAI, before you submit a single application, you can start to understand what your family's SAI is, right? Hopefully now you're starting to grasp the concept of how important it is. So there's actually two different types of SAIs. There's the federal SAI, which is derived singularly from the FAFSA, right? So if the school only requires the FAFSA for financial aid, they use the federal methodology to calculate your SAI, right? So for this family, we'll round up whatever, we'll call it $35,000. The second type of SAI that exists, and I'm going to come back to why there's a range between 20 and 31,000, but it's called the institutional SAI, right? The institutional SAI. The institutional SAI is used by 200 private schools in the country, right? BU, Columbia, Hopkins, showing right here, Syracuse, Drexel, Villanova, Northeastern, BU, all those schools. They use this institutional methodology. Basically, if they require the CSS profile, which I'm going to talk about in detail tonight, in addition to the FAFSA, they use an institutional methodology to calculate your SAI, right? So what I really want you to take away here is the sticker price for this family anyway really doesn't matter, right? Or I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, is the third most important factor. The more important factor is, one, what's their SAI, right? It's 34,000. The private school is going to be between 20 and 31. What does that tell you? This family is in line, eligible for literally $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in grant money at BU and Columbia and Hopkins, right? So going back to my analogy, right? My example, I should say, Columbia's $90,000 for this family, right? It's going to cost them $33,000 a year, right? You click on Columbia. Why? Because Columbia will give them $57,000 in grant money, right? Need-based financial aid. Now, we come down here, and I'll show you when we go through merit scholarships. There are no merit scholarships at Columbia, right? Columbia meets 100% of need-based financial aid. You cannot get a scholarship at Columbia. They don't exist, right? All their resources go towards meeting need-based aid. But so this family, right, is getting $57,000 in grant money at Columbia. But what did I tell you? Need-based aid is not binary. How about at Penn State? Right, you're eligible. So 57 minus 34, you're eligible for whatever $23,000 in grant money. How much is Penn State going to give this family? Zero, right? Zero. They will not give them a dime. Penn State basically does not give any merit either. For 9 out of 10 of you guys in the audience tonight, Penn State will cost you $60,000. I'm not vilifying Penn State. I'm just telling you this is how it works, right? So for better or worse, go into this process eyes wide open. This is what's going to happen, right? So again, right now, you can start to get an understanding of, one, what's my SAI? And hopefully you kind of started to come around to how important that number is. Even if it's super high, it's still important to know that. And I'm going to explain to that later. But one, what's my SAI? Two, and when you set up a free account, you get to pick up to 3 schools for free. Don't pick Penn State. They're not going to give you anything, so it's a waste of time. Pick, three other of your top choice schools and start to see what they are going to give your family, right? Now, I always get the question, how accurate is this? The reason, firstly, need-based financial aid is just math. It's just an equation. So assuming you put in the correct data, right, the correct numbers, I did a pre-read without going into details at Brown. Basically, athletes, they do pre-reads, whatever. Our projections came within $500 of what Brown's going to offer this family, right? They're super accurate. Why? Because it's math. That's all it is. It's math. It's an equation. What's the cost of the school? What's the family's SAI? How does the school meet need-based financial aid? At what percentage, right? So they're very accurate, So yeah, Penn State's not giving you any money, right? So again, you could start to get a handle on this. And guys, you absolutely should. It's crazy to me how people go into this process and basically just throw darts. I hope, a school giving me money. Again, 100% cliche. Hope is not a strategy. You're basically signing up to pay $200, $250, $300,000 a year without even trying to figure out what you're doing. You can always find value in this process, right? You just kind of, have to know how to navigate. And we created the software for kind of a one-stop shop, to start helping them figure out this process. All right. So that's that piece of it. So hopefully now, if you understand, how important that SAI is, right? You understand the lower you get your SAI, the better off you're going to be, right? And guys, a little disappointed. Fire away at the questions. Maybe I'm doing that good a job, but feel free. I'm not missing them, right? Nope, not yet. All right. Well, I guess that means everyone's crystal clear on everything. Perfect. That's a good thing. Oop. All right. So we're going to talk about assets here, right? We're going to talk about assets. On the next slide, we'll talk about income. So just talking about assets. So the first thing that you want to understand, assets and income are going to have different rules, firstly. And the first different rule, because again, income's different, for assets, you report your assets as they exist when you go to sit down to fill out the financial aid applications. They're reported in real time, essentially, right? You report them as they exist the day you sit down to fill out the financial aid applications. Okay. So income's going to be different, which I'm going to talk about, but as in real time. So I'm going to pause only because it's the first question. Uh, what does SAI stand for? Get the notes from a classmate. SAI is the Student Aid Index. Honestly, this is a guy that needs to go back and watch the recording without a doubt. Student Aid Index. It's that important. All right. So, what do we want to know about our SAI, the Student Aid Index, right? Assets are reported in real time, right? Assets are reported in real time. And again, income's going to be different. So first one here, parent assets versus student assets. This is kind of the lowest hanging fruit, the kind of easiest move you can make to make sure that your SAI, student aid index, is as low as possible when you go to fill out the financial aid applications, right? So first thing, big star, boom, boom, boom. I'm taking notes. First star, ideally, right? Ideally, you do not want any assets in the student's name when you fill out the financial aid applications. I'll say it again. Ideally, you don't want any assets in the student's name when you go to fill out the financial aid applications. Why? Because student assets are factored in, or I like to use the word taxed, at a much higher percentage than parent assets. In other words, if you reported $20,000 in student assets, that would increase your SAI much more dramatically than $20,000 in parent assets, right? What do? Most times you do not have to do anything. Again, it's about understanding the rules, right? Understanding the process. So jointly owned accounts down here, that's usually, whatever, 7, 8 out of 10 times. That's usually what we're talking about. Where, the kid has, local checking or savings, they saved up, whatever, graduation, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, whatever the case may be. You got 5, 10, $20,000 in checking or savings. 9 times out of 10, the kid was under 18 when the account was open. So your name as the parent was on that account or is on that account. If your name as the parent is on that account, it's your asset as a parent, and that's how you report it, right? So if you have whatever your checking account, you got whatever $20,000, and Johnny has 5,000 in his checking account. Are you going to put I have 20 and Johnny has 5? No, you're going to put you have 25, Johnny has 0. Why? Because that $5,000 increases your SAI much less than if you reported it for him, right? You report it as a parent asset. 529s, right? How about 529s? This one gets messed up all the time. This one gets messed up all the time in terms of 529s, right? It gets misreported to the detriment of the family. So 529s, take a guess in your head. I'm going to ask, are 529s reported as parent asset or a student asset, right? And it's amazing. I do some of these live, not as many anymore, obviously. But I basically get about 50-50. Half say parents, half say students. For the half that said students, thank God you're watching tonight, right? 529s by rule are parent assets. 529s, every single one of them by rule are parent assets, right? You are the kid is the beneficiary, right? But the parent is the custodian of the account. It gets reported as a parental asset. Now, if you choose to, incorrectly report the 529 as a student asset, you're doing it wrong. 2, you're inadvertently driving up your own SAI. 3, no one's going to correct your mistake, right? No one's coming to save you, so to speak. If you report the 529 as a student asset, that's going to balloon your SAI through the roof. And at a school like BU or Columbia or Hopkins, going back to our examples, you're literally talking about thousands of dollars per year. tens of thousands of dollars over the course of 4 years. I've seen it countless times. When someone asks me to review a FAFSA or CSS profile they already submitted, that's the first place I go look. Student assets. What do we report? Yeah, $100,000. This is a 529. Yeah, you reported incorrectly. It counted against you much more than it should have because you reported incorrectly. That's why you didn't get any or as much aid as you wanted. It happens all the time, right? So 529s, parent assets by rule. How about grandparent 529s? Grandma, grandpa set up a 529. They're the custodian of the account. Well, how about that? Perfect. I'll leave it right where it is because it's grandma, grandpa's asset. It does not get reported, right? Does not get reported. And also one of the faster changes, it no longer factors into play down the road either, right? So grandma, grandpa's 529, perfect spot for it. Does not count against you whatsoever, right? This is another big FAFSA change this year, sibling 529s. So what does that mean? Say you have two kids, you have $100,000 in 529, 50 in one kid, 50 in the other. You're only required to report the 50,000 for the kid applying to for college. The other 50,000 of the younger sibling is off the table, right? So in this case, I'd only report $50,000 as a parent investment, right? I wouldn't report 100,000 as you were supposed to in previous years. So that's a good change as well, right? So you're cutting for most families, that's have multiple kids, you're cutting that 529 value in half. So that's a good thing as well. UTMAs or UGMAs, if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. Then you don't have that type of account. But if you do have an UTMA, it's Uniform Gift to Minors Act or Uniform Trust to Minors Act. If you have an UTMA or an UGMA, that is a student asset. That's not ideal. That's a bad spot for it to be. Call whoever manages the account, see what options you have. You may not. There's tax implications, capital gains, whatever. I may be able to help you out if you're in that account, in that spot, especially if it's a significant amount, because that UGMA or UGMA, you have a lot of money in that. That's a student asset. That's going to balloon your SAI through the roof, right? So, unfortunate place for it to be. You may have options though. All right, what's an asset, right? What's an asset? Same rule for 529 that I hold for a niece nephew as for siblings. Yeah, it's only for the kid applying for college, right? The 529 that you report is only for the kid applying for college, right? What's an asset, right? What is an asset for financial aid purposes? Basically everything but, right? Everything but your retirement account is fair game. But your retirement account is off the table, right? 401k, 403b, Roth IRA, 457. Anything in a qualified retirement account is off the table. Anything else liquid is fair game, right? Checking savings, stocks, bonds. If you have a brokerage account that is not retirement, right? Stocks, that's all fair game. That all counts. That's all factored in, right? So that's kind of what they are looking at when we talk about assets. Is debt considered, right? Is debt considered, Matt? We live in New Jersey. We live in New York. Our property taxes are through the roof. Our cost of living's through the roof. Our state income tax is through the roof. Our salary here isn't even comparable to a salary in wherever, Kentucky, wherever you want to say. I get it. I empathize with you, but it doesn't matter, right? Or no one cares. Let me put it that way. It's not a factor, right? It's not a factor. Also, consumer debt, Matt, we have credit card debt, 40,000, 50,000. I got two kids, they play travel hockey. I have car payments. No one cares. Sorry to say, right? Any kind of consumer debt, no school in the country is going to take that into consideration. None. Now, if you do have a mitigating factor you want the school to be aware of, it's up to you to go, report that to the school or let the school know that. If anyone's ever done a FAFSA before, it's just numbers. There's no room for circumstance or context or explanation. Some things schools will take into account. Some schools, if you care for an elderly parent, if you have a special needs child, right, that requires significant financial, support. God forbid someone, has cancer and has significant, right, the word significant, unreimbursed medical expenses. It's not your premiums, right? That's not, it's, unreimbursed medical expenses for a serious illness. High school tuition for a younger child, that some schools, not all of them, some schools will take that into account. So those are some of the mitigating factors that schools will look at. But short answer is that considered no. All right. And then our houses. Let me just pop these questions real quick. Bum, bum, bum. So let's talk about houses. The lower the SAI, the better. Correct. Exactly. We're going to talk about divorced families. So, yeah. Yeah, we're not going to, we can't do trusts. That's too kind of detailed. But we have guys that do if you want. So how should we value your home, right? How should we value our home? This one gets confusing. If you if you confuse it all yet, all right, great. Stay tuned, right? So, one, if you rent, none of this applies to you. This doesn't matter. Two, if you own your own home or any real estate and you are applying to private schools, pay attention, right? Pay attention. So, the FAFSA doesn't care about your house, your primary residence. Off the table, it does not matter, right? It doesn't matter. The FAFSA does not ask about it. So if a school only requires the FAFSA, then your house is off the table. However, there's 200 private schools in the country, right? And it's the name brand private schools, right? The Northeasterns, the BUs, all those type schools, all the Ivies, the MESCACs, all them. Like I've been saying, in addition to the FAFSA, all of those schools require an additional financial aid application called the CSS profile, right? The CSS profile. The CSS profile is a much more in-depth financial aid questionnaire. One of the main differences between the FAFSA and the CSS is going to ask about your house, right? These private schools want to know about your house, and they're going to ask you 4 questions about it. How much you owe? I'm sorry, what year you bought it, how much you paid for it, and then the 2 key questions: what is your house worth, and how much do you owe on it, right? Those are the 2 key questions. Why? Because what are they looking at? Home equity, right? They are looking at your equity in the house. What is equity? The difference between what it's worth and what you owe. That is equity, right? So hypothetically, if I owe if my house is worth 500, I owe 200, I have $300,000 in equity. These 200 private schools, they treat that home equity, most of them do, the same as any other asset, right? They treat it the same as cash. They treat it the same as a 529. They take that equity and they add it onto your SAI, right? And I did a live presentation the other day and I said the exact same thing and I got this, right? And I get it, right? I get the response, right? The old teeth suck. That's not fair. I agree with you. And I hear, what do they expect us to do? Sell our house? Guys, they're businesses, right? Colleges are businesses, right? They're giving their endowment money. They get to set their rules. So, can't fight City Hall. So what can we do? After we're done sucking our teeth, we can go and figure out what the IRS quick sale value means. So what does that mean? So we want to shrink our equity as low as possible, right? The less equity we show, the lower or the less impact it will have on our SAI, right? The less it will raise our SAI. So, and this is kind of counterintuitive. You want to devalue your home, right? In other words, normally you always want to think your house being worth more, right? Not in this case. It's the opposite. You want to value your home as low as reasonably possible. Guys, there's no one-stop shopping. I'm not going to tell you, or I can't tell you, I don't tell you, go to this website and do this. That's not how it works. I'm explaining to you what colleges look at. This is not easy and it's not straightforward. You got to do some work, right? So they look at equity. So let's get to the lowest reasonable level. What vehicle you use to do that? That's up to you, right? So what I subscribe to for my clients, get to the lowest reasonable level and then take 20% off that, right? Why? Because I subscribe and we subscribe to the IRS quick sale value rule. What is that? It's a line in the tax code that states if you had to turn around and sell your house under duress tomorrow, you may receive, the IRS understands that you may receive 20% less than fair market value, right? Go with that number. So going back to my example, my house is worth 500,000, right? Lowest reasonable level I can get it to. I'm going to report it at 400. Take 20% off. Instead of showing $300,000 in equity, I show $200,000 in equity, right? That $100,000 that I shaved off, that may not seem like much, but at BU, Syracuse, Hopkins, Villanova, Drexel, you're talking about $4, $5, $6,000 per year just making that one move that you are potentially saving, right? It matters that much. Um, Multiply that by 4, right? That's 16, 18, 20, $24,000 over the course of 4 years. How you value your home for these private schools is exceedingly important, right? Exceedingly. Don't be like everyone else. You want to think your house being worth more? No, 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 no. Opposite, right? So that's houses. And let me just put a point on this and then I'll scroll through the questions real quick. I told you I'd go back to this and show you why there's a range. So, like all this process, it is very nuanced. Not every single school, just because they require the CSS profile, they'll have your house information. Not all of them take the entire amount of equity that you show in your home and count it against you. There is a range of, some schools will, don't get me wrong. So, for this family, schools that count every dollar of their equity, their SAI would be 31,000. For schools that don't count any of their equity, there, it would be 20,000, right? Most schools probably fall somewhere in the middle or towards the 31,000, right? That's why when you look at BU, when you look at Columbia, when you look at Hopkins for this family, the reason that these costs are all different is primarily because of how they treat home equity, right? So it's very nuanced. And I'm going to say it one more time. Hopefully, we can say it along at home. Every college is a different business. They all do business differently, right? So that's assets, right? And that's assets. And then the equity is the big one. I've seen families before with very moderate incomes. They fill out the CSS profile. They don't get anything. This happened at Lehigh last year. Lehigh takes every dollar of your equity. Very moderate incomes. And they had a significant amount of home equity, and Lehigh, gave them, they gave them a little bit, but it's an $80,000 a year school. They gave this family like $20,000, right? Mainly because their equity was so high. Again, report it to benefit you. All right, let me get this going here. All right, so that's assets here. Now we're going to tackle income while I take a look at a couple of the questions. And guys, I'm not going to get to all these, but yeah, boom. The UGMA by rule is a student account. Yes. Jerry Wang, it is not too early to ask. This will be recorded and emailed to you tomorrow. All right. Guys, some of the more specific questions I cannot answer on the Zoom, right? We only have to talk general. We only are able to talk general. All right. Income, right? Income. What income is used? Your base income year for the class of 2024 is tax year 2022, right? Tax year 2022. You don't get a choice. For better, worse, it's going to be the same year after year. You have to use tax year 2022. Ideally, that works for you. Obviously, some of you, that's going to be a bad, bad news, but you don't get a choice. You do. I'll explain to you if it is bad news, what you have the opportunity to do, but you have to use 2022. Any any junior families in the house, they're going to use your 23 tax returns. Sophomore families, they're going to use your 24 tax returns. What income line do they use? It's line 11, your AGI, right? So if you're going to fill out the MyCap tool and they ask for AGI, this is what they're looking for, the line 11. Ooh, the line 11 is the most important line on the tax code in relation to your SAI. The income makes up the majority of the SAI, quite honestly, right? Student income allowance. Do not confuse this with assets. This happens a lot. You show $100 in student assets, that counts against you. But student income will not if it's under $9,400. So in tax year 2022, your kid had a part-time job, ShopRite, whatever, wherever they worked, great. Keep them working, because as long as they make $9,400 or less, it doesn't count. It doesn't hurt you, right? It won't increase your SAI. Once you cross 9,400 bucks, be aware of that because then it starts to hurt you a lot. That also is true while they're in college, right? So when class of 24 is sophomores in college, you have to do this every year. They're going to use your 23 returns. So listen, kids making more than that, great, right? I'm never going to tell anyone to make less money, but be aware they could be working and that may result, and they're working hard, making good money, but it may just result in paying the school more, right? Or really getting less financial aid. So be aware of that, right? That $9,400 threshold is important. Once you cross that, they start factoring in student income significantly. And again, yes, you do have to do this every year. You have to fill it out every year. However, it's much easier in subsequent years, right? Firstly, you're only dealing with one school as compared to, 8, 10, 12, 15 schools, however many you're applying to. So that's number one. But that being said, the first year is also the most important because that sets your baseline, right? That sets your baseline. So, you need to get obviously to pay as little as possible freshman year. But if Columbia gives my family $40,000, they say, okay, we expect to give the Mulhern family 40 grand over the next 4 years. Now, if you go from having $150,000 income to a $300,000 income, yes, 100% your reward's changing, right? But if you go from 150 to 165, you probably won't, right? You need a pretty substantial increase. Also, these schools are less flexible for enrolled students in terms of going through an appeal process, right? So going back to what I was going to say earlier, say 22, I had a family call me today. In 2022, they sold an investment property, and so that triggered a significant capital gain, right? So that shows as income on your tax return. That balloons their AGI. So that's bad move from a financial aid standpoint, but c'est la vie. What can they do? They can hire me, number one. And then number two, what we can do once the student gets admitted, gets their award, we're going to go back and appeal, right? And you could all do that. I guess you could do it without me. I wouldn't recommend it. We're going to go back and appeal. We're going to say, listen, school financial aid office person, this is our story, right? And you write a letter and you explain your situation, right? So that's kind of what you do if 22 is kind of an aberration. But the same is true, once your baseline is set, that's I had a family of BU, and I used to tell that story in the last slide. Long story short, they should have got $40,000 in grant money. They wound up only getting 20,000 or 23,000 because they messed up the financial aid application. They put their retirement account as investments. They ballooned their SAI. They originally got zero. Then on the back end, I got involved. We got 23,000. They should have got 40. So they have 17,000 on the table. You would think in 2023, oh, well, now we can go get the 40 that we should have got. BU said, no, that's all you're getting, 23. That's all they got for all 4 years, right? So that first year is important. All right. A lot of questions. A lot of questions. So if your federal SAI is negative, you have a very low income. So does low income plus no assets negatively affect chances for acceptance? No. However, let me elaborate on that. That's completely overblown. So there's two types of schools, need blind and need aware. Most schools, I shouldn't say most, a lot of the high-end schools are need blind, right? Harvard is a $66 billion endowment. They take whoever they want. Most schools are need blind, right? Some schools are need aware. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Unless you're willing to say, I'm not, you have two choices, apply financial aid or don't. Unless you're willing to just say, I'm ready to pay, $85,000 a year for your school, I'm not going to apply financial aid. You don't have a choice. So whether they're going to, if that's negatively going to hurt your student, it doesn't matter. You can't go to the school without the financial aid anyway, right? So control what you can control. Stop, you can't control how the school views your kid. What you control right now is how you present your SAI and which schools you apply to. Those are the two things you control. That's my best advice. The Social Security for a kid count, not if it's a student that's applying. That does not count. Parent student loan debt, that's a mitigating factor. Some schools might count it, some might not. Yeah, if your situation changed from 22 moving forward, you got to appeal. What's the maximum you can make to qualify for financial aid? I hate that question. Why? Because you're not understanding how this works. It's about what school are we talking about, right? What school are we talking about? There are no maximums, there are no cutoffs. It's very family specific, school specific. Fill in your cap tool. Yeah, guys, if you can, yeah, if you have a change, you got to appeal. All right. So that's kind of the income here. And I get it. A lot of people do have changes, and 22 is not representative. There's nothing you can do on the front end. You have to go back to the school and appeal the financial aid award. All right, quick New York family. So this is again all need-based aid, and I know it's called Excelsior Scholarship. It's really not a scholarship. It's a need-based financial aid grant. State of New York, hesc.newyork.gov. That's your website. Two programs in the state of New York. The TAP, right, could be used at any school in the state of New York for obviously New York residents. Then you have the Excelsior, which could be used at the CUNYs and the SUNYs. It's not free. Your kid's not going to Binghamton for free, right? It's $5,500 a year. You get the Excelsior. Your income has to be 125 or below. If it's 125,001, you're not getting it, right? It's income based. It's needs based. It basically at Binghamton, it's 30 grand a year, right? In state. You get the Excelsior. Binghamton's $25,000 a year, right? Room and board, including room and board. That's how it works. State of New Jersey, HESA.org, completely useless website. Go give it a shot. Give it anyway. Don't take my word for it, but I bet you I draw the same conclusions. NJ Tag Grant. Again, you can see the income limits. Tag Grant, tuitions assistance grant. It's not a hard cutoff. Like the TAP in New York, the tag can be used at any school in the state of New Jersey. Also, New Jersey has two specific programs, in my opinion, are the answers to the Excelsior Scholarship. Honestly, the Garden State Guarantee could be used at any New Jersey public school, and then Rutgers, New Brunswick, and it's only Rutgers, New Brunswick has a new program called the Scarlet Guarantee. If your AGI is 100 or below, you get a really discounted rate at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Google it. There's a different chart for the different incomes. All right. So thus far, we've talked primarily about need-based financial aid, right? Yeah, guys, if line 11 excludes an IRA distribution, Q excluded. No, that's part of your income. You have to appeal it. That was a bad year to take an IRA distribution, right? There's a 401k withdrawal count. Yeah, we did this a ton during COVID, right? Everyone took 401k distributions. That's part of your AGI. That's part of your income. That stinks because that's more work, but you have options. What do? You get an award, then you have to go back and appeal. How do you appeal? It's at each individual financial aid office, right? So what if I don't qualify for need-based financial aid, right? What happens then? What do I need to do then? Firstly, you are not resigned to pay $85,000 a year, right? When families say, I can't believe they expect me to pay $85,000 a year. Guys, it's their money. They get to decide how they dole it out. If, you don't have to pay $85,000 a year. There's 1,000 colleges in the country. What you can't do is pick the school, predetermine your school, and then pick the financial outcome, right? In an ideal world, your kid's top choice is also the best one financially. That rarely works out that way, So what you want to first do, if you're not going to qualify for need-based financial aid, step one, know that, understand that, right? How do I know? Because I'm going to open a MyCap account or not, or use whatever vehicle you want, and I'm going to figure out what my SAI is, right? So for this family, right, their SAI is over $100,000. They are not getting any need-based financial aid, right? So Columbia down here is going to cost them how much? $91,000 sticker price. Why was the other family getting 50 grand from Columbia? This family's getting zero because of this SAI. How much you pay at Columbia and Johns Hopkins and Duke and Notre Dame and Wash U, right, is solely determined by one thing and only one thing. What is your SAI? It's the only thing that matters. That is how these colleges determine how much you're going to pay, right? So if you have 100,000 plus SAI, you're paying full sticker price at any school that only gives need-based financial aid, right? So then what? Well, you don't have to go to Columbia, right? And here's what most times a family that I'm talking to that have $100,000 SAI or greater, just because you have $100,000 SAI does not mean you in your real financial position and financial reality in your family's financial reality does not mean that you can afford or you're in a position to start paying $85,000 a year for a school, right? So no one's saying that that SAI is reflective of reality. It's not. 9 times out of 10, it is not. But again, this is the system. So again, if you're not going to qualify for any need-based financial aid, step one is knowing that, right? Step two, right? Stages of grief, accepting that. Step three, understanding that some schools only give need-based financial aid, thus you will not receive anything, right? Don't go into this process, get accepted to Columbia in April and say, oh shit, it's going to cost me 90 grand a year, right? You should know that going in. You can know that going in, right? Right here, right now. So then what, right? I'm not going to get any need-based financial aid. So that pool of money is unavailable to you. You need to focus on the other pool of money, merit scholarships, right? Merit scholarships. And so I just have two schools here, University of Delaware. So this is also why this tool is great, right? University of Delaware for this kid, Delaware is going to give him 15 grand, right? And listen, I feel like a lot of people say, well, they're going to a SUNY, they're going to Rutgers. That's 100% fine. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. But you don't have to resign yourself to, if your kid wants to get out of the state, you do have different options, right? And it doesn't mean it's 85,000 bucks. If you look down here, you see for this kid, all right, 31 ACT, 3 GPA, he's going to get 15 grand at Delaware, right? They give up to 17, they might give up to 21. So these merit awards exist at a school like Delaware, right? That's a school where, pretty good likelihood that, if your kid is a pretty good student, that they're going to get a merit award, right? University of South Carolina. I like to tell the story to kind of illustrate the point I've been making about, families with high EFCs. You got to find merit. At least give yourself the option of turning down the merit award that your kid receives. So I had a family a few years ago, kid, they had, $100,000 EFC, but they had a couple other kids behind. They were in no position to be paying $70,000 a year. At the time, Brown was only $70,000, right? The kid's dream school was Brown. I hear that a lot. Dream school, I don't care what the school costs. If my kid gets into their dream school, we're going to send them there. You're perfectly entitled to that approach. But that approach is one of the reasons there is a student loan crisis in this country, right? Disregard for the actual cost of these schools. So this family, they hired me, Matt, let's work together. We knew going in, you're not going to get any need-based financial aid. Brown will cost you $70,000. There is nothing I can do about that. But what I can do for you, let me give you some other options of schools you can consider that, one, if you don't get into Brown, two, at least you have a different balanced list from a financial standpoint as well as admissions, right? So long story short, fast forward, we come down to it, kid gets into Brown. I didn't think he would. Kid gets into Brown. Good for him. We had calculated, now this is before we even applied. We had calculated, right, Brown 70 grand, that's $250,000. They had to borrow. Brown was going to cost this family $400,000 over the course of 15 years paying off loans. $400,000 to go to Brown. That's what it was going to cost, right? I also had to apply to a number of other schools, but again, it boiled down to Brown versus University of South Carolina. Those were the choices. Listen, in a vacuum, no one is picking South Carolina. I'm sorry, no one is picking Brown. No one is picking South Carolina over Brown, right? Obviously, no one. I'm not saying anyone would, but guess what? We're not in a vacuum. This family understood the cost of Brown for them was $400,000. South Carolina gave this kid what we call an out-of-state offset, right? He was paying in-state tuition. It was going to cost him $25,000 a year. By the way, South Carolina elite honors program. By the way, South Carolina elite international business program, right? This kid was a business kid. South Carolina, $25,000 a year. The parents said, look, we got 25 a year. We got you covered. We can handle that. You can graduate debt free. You won't have a single loan. But over here, we're going to be paying student loans for the rest of our lives. The kid right now is in his third year at the University of South Carolina, international business program, honors program, doing exceedingly well. I talked to his parents the other day because they have a younger kid, right? So listen, this was a business kid. I said to him, listen, you're in business. This is your first business decision, right? And I'm not telling you that for some families, Brown might be worth $70,000, $80,000, $400,000 over the course of 4 years. Maybe it is. I'm not telling you it's not, but give yourself options. Don't have every school that your kid applies to cost you, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, right? And how do you do it? You have to apply to schools that give merit. You don't have to, right? But that's my strong recommendation. How do you find the merit schools? You know what I'm going to tell you. Use the tool, right? Use the tool. All right, let's get back to it. Also, and so this comes down the road, but you want to apply to competing schools, and this only is going to get your merit award increased, right? Where you have some leverage. So, I always say Sacred Heart, Quinnipiac, Fairfield, all competing schools. Sacred Heart's my top choice. I apply to Fairfield and Quinnipiac. Why? I want to get their awards so I can go back and leverage them off Fairfield, right? But that comes later. But again, you have to apply to schools that will actually give you merit. All three of those schools do. And then the other type of school, if you have $100,000 SAI, you're not going to get any need-based financial aid. Look for value schools. I was on the phone with a mom today. The kids' top two choice schools, ironically, Clemson, Penn State. Both cost $60,000, will not give a dime, right? Penn State, Clemson, I call the Penn State of the South. Neither one of those schools are giving them any money. They're both going to cost you $60,000. This family's SAI was $100,000. What's my advice? Listen, at the very least, go find a school, right? James Madison costs $45,000. You just save $15,000 a year times 4, right? $60,000. Go find a school that's $40,000. Florida State, right? You just save $20,000 a year times 4. That's $80,000, right? So there are those value schools that exist, even if you're not getting anything, that are on the lower end of the tuition spectrum. I had them on the other day. They were basically Syracuse. Syracuse wasn't going to give them anything. It was $86,000. My advice, go somewhere else that costs you $40,000, $45,000. Yeah, they might not give you anything, but I just saved you $160,000, right? This is real money. You always have options, but you don't get to pick the school all the time, right? That's unfortunate maybe. But, again, understand that approach, or I'm going to go wherever I get in, wherever I want. That's why there's a student loan crisis in the country. And last thing here, think how you shop for anything else, right? Imagine you're buying a house and you go to the lawyer's office and said, Mr. Lawyer, I'm about to buy this house. How much does it cost? I don't care what it costs. I'm buying it, no matter what, but how much is it, right? It doesn't make any sense. Figure out what the cost is, right? And apply to schools that will actually, be, realistic for your family. Now, that's going to differ by family, obviously. But be realistic about the cost here. Be realistic about what you can afford, like we do for anything else, right? All right, coming down the stretch here, guys. We are into the nuts and bolts phase of our program. How we doing on time? Ooh, all right. I told you, an hour 15 tops. No schools alike, right? I get asked the question, Matt, let me just check these questions. Merit scholarships amount every year. Yeah, good question, right? So merit scholarships are awarded the first year over 4 years. So, right, the University of Miami, good merit school, they'll say, congratulations, we're offering you $20,000, $80,000 over the next 4 years. Exactly right. Is it worth going to an expensive school if you're planning on majoring in a lower paying major? This is an investment, right? Whether you like to think of it or not, sending your kid to college is an investment in them. Think of it like that or not, but that's what it is. Is the juice worth the squeeze, right? I love that phrase. Ask yourself that. If you're going to spend, just forget, would anyone spend $400,000 to make $50,000 a year? Does that make sense? Not to me, but everyone has different sense. So yes, your end goal matters, right? What are you going to be? If you're going to be so I'll give you an example. I have a cousin. She's an anesthesiologist. She borrowed $200,000 to go to doctor school, to go to medical school. She's making $400,000 a year, right? She's going to be able to pay that back. The problem becomes when you borrow $200,000 to go make $50,000 a year. That's where the problem is. So absolutely, right? I get asked all the time, Matt, what's the FAFSA deadline? That is the exact wrong question to be asking. There's no such thing as a FAFSA deadline. Here's the question you want to be asking. What is the financial aid deadline for the schools I am applying to? Why? Because they're all different. Every school is different. They all have different rules. They all have different deadlines. There are no universal deadlines. None. They don't exist, right? How are you applying? Early action, early decision, regular? That will dictate the deadline for the admissions. There's a different financial aid deadline, right? Some schools have merit application deadlines. You're applying to University of South Carolina, great. Even if you're applying regular decision, if you don't submit by 11/15, you will not be considered for the honors program. You will not be considered for their big awards. You want to apply to Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill, early action deadline 10/15. University of Georgia, early action deadline 10/15. UMass Amherst, scholarship deadline 11/5. Every school has different deadlines, all of them, right? It's up to you to know who requires what. And I know we're getting long, but this story is worthwhile. I had a kid call me or a dad call me last year. Heartbreaking, quite honestly. Kid got into NYU. There was a Pell Grant family. They had $5,000. The Pell Grant comes from the federal government, so it comes from the FAFSA. The kid gets into NYU. It's April. He says, NYU, are you giving me any money? NYU says, kid, did you submit a CSS profile? The kid says, what's a CSS profile? NYU says, you missed the deadline. You're not getting any aid. This is a family that, I'm not exaggerating, should have been paying $10,000 a year to go to NYU. Instead, they had a $5,000 Pell Grant, and NYU wouldn't give them a dime. Why? Because they never submitted the CSS profile. The dad's telling me we didn't know existed. Well, it's not NYU's fault, right? It's not my fault. So whose fault is it, Dad? You know, it's up. You have to be an educated consumer, right? It's up to you to know who gets what by when. The I didn't know, that that doesn't work, right? Ignorance is not bliss in this case. You have to know who needs what by when, right? You're applying to UPenn, Princeton, USC. They all want a third financial aid application, right? It's not easy. It's not straightforward. A lot going on. It's your responsibility, the student's responsibility. The college will not tell you. You cannot depend on the college to say, no, you're missing a deadline. No, we're missing this. No, that will not happen. It's up to you. But you can do it. Hope I'm not scaring anybody. The FAFSA, it's not available to December. It changes nothing. It doesn't change anything. So what? It's available in December. When it's available, do it. Most schools that you're going to apply ED to, they're going to require the CSS profile, right? I'm going to come back to these two. They're going to require the CSS profile, all the private schools. You need to do the CSS profiles available now. You need to do the CSS profile now, right? For 11/1, 11/15 early action, early decision deadlines. At the private schools, the FAFSA doesn't matter at Columbia. It doesn't matter at Johns Hopkins. It doesn't matter at Villanova. The FAFSA is irrelevant. It's about the CSS profile, which you have to do in November. The fact that the FAFSA is available in December changes nothing. Why is the FAFSA available in December? It's not by design, right? It's the efficiencies, or, obviously the opposite of the Department of Education. They didn't mean for it to be available in December. It's just not ready yet. Okay, divorce separated situations. We're going to tackle that now. Pay attention. Now, let's see. Here we go. So, firstly, the legality of your divorce or separation is irrelevant, right? Whether you're legally or formally divorced does not matter. Your marriage status, unmarried, married, none of that matters. Here's the standard. Are both parents living in two separate households? That's it, right? Are you maintaining two separate households? If you're maintaining two separate households, you are, for the financial aid purposes, in a divorce separated situation, or you're in the divorce separated bucket, we'll say. Now, this is one of the FAFSA changes. Previous, the standard was, who does the kid live with 51% or more of the time? That's changing. The new standard for who is the custodial parent, who submits the FAFSA, the new standard is who provides more financial support for the kid. Someone explain to me what that means, because I really don't know. Point being, that's very gray. That's ambiguous, right? Mom pays for, whatever, hockey, food. Dad pays for rent, whatever, right? Like, how that's split up, who knows? So you have some flexibility. You have some leeway there. There's some gray area, quite honestly, of, who you say is the custodial in some cases. But again, the standard is who provides more financial support for the parent, for the student. Now, for the FAFSA, only the custodial parent's finances go on the FAFSA. Only the custodial parents. It's like the non-custodial parent doesn't exist. However, right? Always a however. On the CSS profile, you see here, divorce separated. The CSS profile, those 200 private schools are different. They're going to want the custodial parents' financial information. They're also going to want the non-custodial parents' financial information, right? They use both custodial and non-custodial parents' income and assets to determine your SAI, right? Now, again, it's tough to explain here tonight, but if you're in that situation, you could honestly take advantage of it for divorce separated people in that situation. You just have to know how to do it. Who knows how? I do. All right. Pros and cons of the FAFSA changes. I'm not going to go through these in detail. Untaxed income is off the table. Talked to a 9/11 New York City fireman earlier today. He's out on disability, disability pension from 9/11 illness. That pension is off the table for the FAFSA. Doesn't count, right? So that's good. Here's one of the biggest cons, but this one I want you to pay attention if you have multiple kids, and I'm hustling. An hour 20. I promise we'll be out of here. Families with multiple kids in college at the same time. I'm sure you all have heard the FAFSA's changing the rules where they're not splitting the EFC anymore. Nonsense change, ridiculous. However, pay attention. And if you have multiple kids, super pay attention, right? It's more nuanced than that, right? And this is one of the reasons that even if you're not getting aid freshman year, you may want to consider still getting aid. So you look at this family, right? Freshman year, their SAI is 99,000. Columbia, they're not getting a dime, but now they have two kids in college at the same time. What happens? Well, I thought FAFSA changed the rule. Now it doesn't matter. FAFSA did change the rule, but what did we talk about? The private schools don't use the same rules as the FAFSA schools, right? So now I have two kids in college. My $90,000 SAI went to $60,000. So now I'm getting $30,000 in grant money at Columbia because I have two kids in college, right? Long story short, the private schools still give you credit for having multiple kids in college at the same time. You can absolutely use that to your advantage. Again, and this is a line I meant to say earlier. Your school selection financially does not start when you sit down to fill out the FAFSA, right? The financial aid process starts when you go to build your school list. All right, we got the numbers dropping, which means I got to hustle and we got to come down the stretch here. I'm losing people. I feel you. It's been an hour change. We're getting there. Almost there. 5 more minutes, I promise. All right. I just, I do. I get really passionate about this. Small businesses, usually FAFSA didn't care about your small business. Now they do. You got to put a valuation on it. How do you do it? Lower the better, like all this. All right. Come on. All right. These are the families that the FAFSA changes are affecting the most, right? We talked about most of them. We hit most of them. 2-parent households, the 529s. You have multiple kids in college. Again, it's more nuanced than simply the FAFSA changing the rules. That is true at FAFSA only schools, not true at private schools. So again, be aware of that. You fall into this process. I think I've said it before. Is not easy. It's not straightforward. It is very nuanced, right? And a lot of it is about what is your family situation and, what schools are we talking about, right? All right, last one here, guys, and we're out of here, I promise. So how do you appeal? I talked a lot about the appeal, kind of the timing of the appeal. You can't appeal an award you don't have. Save the appeal for once your kid gets in, once they get admitted. Here we've been doing appeals, for 12 years. When we first started doing them, we were kind of, I guess, special, I'll call it. No, not many people knew about it. I still think I'm special. But not many people knew about appeals. Now the cat's out of the bag, but you should appeal. They're not going to rescind your admissions because you appeal. You absolutely have the opportunity to appeal at every school. If you have some of those financial job loss, unemployment, something of that nature, where 2022 is not reflective of your current financial reality, you do have the opportunity to do a financial aid appeal. And there's a difference. There's a merit appeal. There's a financial aid appeal. There are two different strategies, quite honestly. But you can appeal, right? All right, here we go. What next, right? What next? So keep the ball rolling. Guys, I'm serious. We created the software. We give you free access so you can be an educated consumer, as you navigate this process. We really obviously want to help you as a family, help your family, help our communities, not put themselves in student loan debt, right? Like, don't do it. You avoid that cost. There's nothing wrong with borrowing for college, right? But there's a problem with excessive borrowing, right? So what can you do now? Again, continue to educate yourself, set up your free MyCap account. We host office hours every Monday. If you have a specific question, you can get those answered for free at the office hours, right? What I primarily do is work with families on a one-on-one capacity. Part of why I tell you is people don't know that people like me exist. You're going to sell your house, you know there's a realtor. You got to do your taxes, you know there's a CPA. What I do is wake me when it's over. Wake me when it's over. I can't sing. So what does that mean? I work with you on a one-on-one capacity. Here's some of the highlights. Someone like that. Here's what we do. We help you strategize. What school should you apply to, right? We complete the financial aid forms for you. We'll guide you through the appeal process. And then it becomes, how the hell do we pay for this? We got you covered there. Some of the more common families that choose to engage with us on this front, there's a lot at stake. 2-parent households, divorced. 60% of my clients are divorced. Business owner, homeowner, there's a lot of money at stake. You don't want to screw it up. You're not in a position to pay $85,000 a year. You do not have to, right? Now, that being said, we really appreciate and value the relationships with your high schools. So firstly, if you enjoyed the presentation tonight, let your high school guidance counselor know that you appreciated it, you enjoyed it, you felt like it was a value, it was informative, that the guy doing the presentation was great, super funny. He was kind of in the shadows, but he looked like he was pretty good looking too. Whatever you want to tell them. The positive feedback we do appreciate, right? But also too, right? We will send the recording out to everybody tomorrow, right? We will send the recording out to everybody tomorrow. You will also have an opportunity for a free 20-minute consultation with myself if you want to discuss, how we could potentially work together, right? If you have kind of those specific questions, office hours is your route. If you want some more kind of strategy advice, and how we can potentially work together, you get a free 20-minute consult with me. Again, we value the relationships with your schools, so feel free to take us up on that. I will. I'm going to say, and that's it, right? Because I'm going to have them edit out the end of this. But I'm going to scroll through the questions. Let me see if I can answer any more of these. So, all right. So is early decision a good idea? So this is always a hot topic. Look, early decision, one, it has to be your kid's first choice. Two, be comfortable with the number that you're looking at as far as costs at the school. Early decision does not affect need-based financial aid. None. It may affect merit. Depends on the school. Is it a good strategy for shopping merit awards? No. You're committed to the school. No. So if you're not a citizen, if you're an international student, some schools will give need-based aid, some schools will not, school by school. My slides aren't advancing. Oh, boy. I don't know how long I've been doing that for. Sorry. Well, now I'm looking at myself. Sorry about that. Now that's me. My situation. Rodette, is your hubby's income taken into consideration? Yes. If you're remarried, his income counts as well. We do not send. We used to send the presentation deck. We do not anymore because there's some unauthorized usages. So no, unfortunately, we do no longer send the slide deck. Hello, sir. May I have your contact info? There it is, right there. Give me a shout. Guys, that's all I got tonight. Drew, raising your hand. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Once again, big shout out to the guidance departments at your school. If you enjoyed it, you found some value, let them know that, please. That's my one ask of you. Let them know that you appreciate it, you enjoyed it, you found some value here. And again, going back to where we started, hopefully, right? Hopefully you guys have a much better understanding of how the process works, how to strategize a little bit yourself in terms of navigating the financial aid apps. And basically put yourself, put your family, put your child in the best position possible. There's a lot at stake, your kids, your money, make sure you're as educated as possible as you do this. Once again, look out for that email tomorrow. Hoping to speak to a lot, if not most, if not all of you. Otherwise, everybody, thank you for coming. Have a good night. Take care.